My name is Garrett Brennan, and for 35 years, I've held one of the most powerful positions in Illinois law. But if you passed me on the street, you'd never know
The
it.
Peninsula
I never thought my
Chicago's
heart
Grand
could
Ballroom
break twice in one
shimmered like a
lifetime.
jewel box lined
First when I
with
buried my
crystal and
wife
gold.
Caroline, and
I
now
stood
as I
frozen
watch
in
my
the
daughter
doorway,
Sophie crumble,
my weathered
while her
hands
fiancé
trembling not from
told 200
age,
guests that
but
her
from the
father
raw
wasn't worthy of
cruelty of
attending
what
her
was
wedding.
unfolding.
All because
My
of the
Sophie,
$89 suit
my baby
I'd
girl who
worn to
once
every
believed her
important moment
daddy
of her
could
life.
fix anything, stood at the altar in a $50,000 dress, watching her fiancé, Preston Whitmore IV, raise his manicured hand to summon security. "This man," Preston announced, his Harvard-educated voice slicing through the stunned silence like a scalpel, was explicitly warned not to attend unless he could dress appropriately for a Whitmore family event. Yet here he stands, disrespecting my family's legacy with that department store embarrassment. 200 faces turned toward me in synchronized judgment. Investment bankers from Wall Street, tech moguls from Silicon Valley, old Chicago families whose names graced hospital wings and museum galleries. And in the center of it all, my Sophie, the little girl who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during late-night case reviews, who believed her daddy could fix anything in a second-hand suit.
Daddy?
Her voice shattered on that single word, the same tremor I'd heard when she was 9 and I had to explain why Mommy wasn't coming home from the hospital. But this time, I couldn't pull her into my arms and promise everything would be okay. This time, the wound was being carved by the man she'd chosen to trust with her heart. Darius Coleman, the hotel's head of security, approached with the measured steps of someone who'd handled delicate situations before. He was built like a linebacker but moved with surprising grace, his earpiece catching the chandelier light as he assessed the situation. "Remove him," Preston commanded, with the casual authority of someone who'd been obeyed since birth. "I'm paying $400,000 for this wedding. I won't tolerate someone who shops at JCPenney contaminating my family's reputation." Darius stopped 3 feet from me, his trained eyes conducting that split-second evaluation security professionals perfect over years. Then something shifted in his expression, a flicker of recognition that Preston couldn't see from his position at the altar. "I'm sorry, Mr. Whitmore," Darius said, his deep Chicago accent carrying clearly through the ballroom. "This man is on our federal protection list, Priority 1 clearance. If your heart just clenched remembering a moment when someone you loved chose cruelty over kindness, please hit that subscribe button, because what happens next proves that sometimes angels wear discount suits and demons dress in designer labels." Whispers erupted like scattered gunfire across the ballroom. Preston's face flushed the deep red of expensive Bordeaux, his Harvard-educated brain struggling to process defiance from someone he considered beneath him. "Federal protection? That's absurd. He drives a 2012 Ford Taurus." Darius stood his ground, immovable as the Chicago skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Sir, I'm not at liberty to discuss specifics, but Mr. Brennan is significant, extremely significant. Garrett Brennan. That's me. For 35 years, I'd carried that name through courtrooms across Illinois, through decisions that shaped millions of lives, through victories and defeats that redefined justice in the Midwest. But to Preston Whitmore IV, I was just Sophie's embarrassing father, a stain on his family's perfectly pressed reputation that needed to be eliminated. Significant? Preston's laugh cracked like lake ice in March. "He works at some courthouse filing papers. Sophie told me herself." My daughter had kept my secret at my request. After Caroline died, after years of people suddenly becoming friends when they learned my position, I'd asked Sophie to keep my professional life private. I wanted to be judged for who I was, not what I was. But watching my daughter's fairy tale wedding transform into a public humiliation, I wondered if my desire for authenticity had cost her everything.
6 months earlier,
I'd walked into Preston's Gold Coast penthouse hoping to meet the man who made my daughter's eyes light up. Instead, I met someone who would teach me that the devil doesn't always wear horns. Sometimes he wears a $10,000 watch and calls you sport. The private elevator to Preston's penthouse required a special code, the kind that whispered, "You don't belong here," to anyone who'd ever worried about making rent. Sophie held my hand as we ascended 40 floors, her excitement radiating like sunshine despite the knot of dread forming in my stomach. She'd been dating Preston for 8 months, and this dinner was meant to be our formal introduction. "You'll love him, Daddy," she said, squeezing my fingers with the same nervous energy she had before her first day of kindergarten. "He's brilliant, successful, and he makes me feel like I'm the only woman in the world." The elevator opened directly into a living space that looked like it belonged in a magazine about how the ultra-wealthy lived. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Lake Michigan like a personal postcard. Everything was white marble and black leather and sharp edges, a space designed to intimidate rather than welcome. Preston emerged from his designer kitchen carrying a bottle of wine that probably cost more than most people's car payments. He was handsome in that manufactured way. Personal trainer body, veneered teeth, hair that looked effortlessly perfect but probably required a $500 stylist. "Mr. Brennan," he said, extending his hand. His handshake was firm, calculated, the kind they teach at Ivy League business schools. "Sophie's told me so much about you." That was the first lie. I could see it in his eyes. Sophie had told him nothing he considered worth remembering. To him, I was just an obstacle to navigate, a working-class embarrassment to manage until the wedding was over and he could minimize our interactions to obligatory holidays. We sat at a glass dining table that reflected the city lights below. Preston poured wine with the ceremony of someone who wanted you to notice the label, Chateau Petrus 1982. I recognized it from a fraud case I'd presided over. This bottle alone could have paid for a year of someone's college tuition. "So," Preston said after the pleasantries had dried up like spilled champagne, "Sophie tells me you work at the courthouse. Some kind of clerical position?" The way he said clerical made it sound like janitor. Sophie shifted uncomfortably beside me, her hand finding mine under the table, like she had when she was little and scared of thunderstorms. "Daddy raised me alone after Mom died," Sophie said, her voice carrying a defensive edge that made my heart ache. "He gave me everything I needed and more." "Of course, darling." He patted her hand like she was a child who'd said something cute but irrelevant. I'm sure he did his best with limited resources. The wine turned to vinegar on my tongue. In my desk drawer at the courthouse, I kept a photo from Sophie's Northwestern Law graduation, paid for entirely without loans, because I'd saved every penny since Caroline's death, living modestly so my daughter could soar without debt. But Preston didn't need to know that. Not yet. "Tell me about your family," I said, deflecting before I said something that would hurt Sophie. Preston's chest puffed with pride like a peacock displaying its feathers. "The Whitmores arrived in Chicago with the original Marshall Field. My great-great-grandfather built half the loop. Father runs Whitmore Capital. You've probably seen our building downtown. Mother is a Pullman, as in the railroad Pullmans. We summer in Martha's Vineyard, winter in Aspen." He continued for 20 minutes cataloging wealth and connections like an auctioneer listing artifacts. Each name dropped was calculated to remind me of my place in his hierarchy, somewhere below the help but slightly above invisible. "And where did you grow up, Mr. Brennan?" he finally asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer wouldn't impress him. "Bridgeport," I said simply. His nose wrinkled as if he'd smelled something unpleasant. Bridgeport. Working class, diverse, the kind of neighborhood people like Preston drove around, not through. "How authentic," he managed, the word dripping with condescension. The evening deteriorated from there. Every story Sophie shared about our life together, teaching her to ride a bike in Grant Park, our Sunday dinners at Lou Malinati's, the father-daughter dances at her public school, Preston met with barely concealed disdain. "Public school," he mused at one point. "That must have been quite the cultural experience." Sophie's hand tightened on mine. I could feel her happiness dimming with each condescending comment, watching the father she adored being diminished by the man she thought she loved.
The call came at 5:47 a.m. on a rainy Tuesday. Preston's voice as cold as Lake Michigan in January, delivering an ultimatum that would shatter the last illusion I had about the man my daughter planned to marry. Some people don't have hearts. They have spreadsheets where their souls should be. My phone rang just as I was watching the sunrise paint the Chicago skyline through my kitchen window, coffee steam curling up like prayers I'd stopped believing would be answered. The caller ID showed Preston. In 4 months since that first dinner, he'd never called me directly. "Garrett," he said without any greeting, as if basic courtesy was beneath him, "we need to discuss the wedding arrangements." I set down my coffee cup, already sensing the storm brewing in his tone. Outside, rain began to streak the windows, turning the city into an impressionist painting. "Good morning to you too, Preston. Let's dispense with the pleasantries. I've been reviewing the guest list Sophie provided. The Whitmore side includes 3 federal judges, 2 senators, and enough Fortune 500 CEOs to restructure the entire economy." He paused, letting the weight of those names settle like stones in my stomach. "And then there's your side. My side consists of people who genuinely love Sophie. Your side," he continued, as if I hadn't spoken, "consists of courthouse clerks, public defenders, and people who think Olive Garden is fine dining." The morning light suddenly felt cold against my modest kitchen table, illuminating the coffee stains and scratches from decades of quiet breakfasts, homework sessions with Sophie, late-night case reviews. Through my window, I could see Mrs. Nakamura from next door walking her ancient terrier, the same route she'd taken every morning since Caroline's funeral 13 years ago. "Preston, what exactly are you trying to say?" "I'm saying that appearances matter, Garrett. The wedding will be covered by the Tribune, Chicago Magazine, maybe even Vogue. The Whitmore-Brennan union will be analyzed and documented. Important people will judge our families based on those images." Our families, as if I was already being absorbed and erased. "I'll be wearing my best suit," I said quietly, though something cold was spreading through my chest. His laugh was sharp enough to draw blood. "Your best suit. Garrett, I've seen your best suit. You wore it to dinner last month. It's from JCPenney. I can tell by the cut, the fabric, the way it bags at the shoulders. My shoes cost more than your entire outfit." If you've ever been made to feel small by someone who confused price tags with human value, hit that like button right now. Let's stand together against those who think wealth grants them the right to wound. It's perfectly appropriate formal wear. For a courthouse Christmas party, perhaps, not for a Whitmore wedding at the Peninsula. Not when you'll be photographed next to men wearing custom Armani and Brioni. Not when those photos will hang in our Lake Forest mansion for the next 50 years. I thought of Sophie, probably still asleep in her Lincoln Park apartment, blissfully unaware that her fiancé was calling to humiliate her father before the sun had fully risen. "What do you want me to do, Preston?" "I want you to let me help. There's a store on Michigan Avenue, Saks. They have suits that would be adequate. Nothing extravagant, but presentable. I'll cover the cost. Consider it an investment in Sophie's happiness." "I don't need your money. This isn't about what you need. It's about what Sophie deserves.
Do you want her wedding photos ruined because her father was too proud to accept help? Do you want her friends from Northwestern whispering about why her father looks like he wandered in from a food court? The manipulation was surgical in its precision, weaponizing my love for Sophie against my dignity. In my courtroom, I'd seen similar tactics used by prosecutors and defense attorneys alike. Find the pressure point and squeeze until something breaks. I'll wear my navy suit, the one from JCPenney. It's clean, pressed, and appropriate. Silence stretched across the phone line, taut as piano wire about to snap. Then don't come. The words landed like a judge's gavel, final and devastating. Outside, thunder rolled across Lake Michigan, as if the universe itself was clearing its throat to speak. Excuse me? You heard me. If you insist on embarrassing my family with your discount store clothing, then don't come to the wedding. I'll make your excuses to Sophie. Tell her you're sick, had a work emergency, whatever saves her from the truth that her father cares more about his stubborn pride than her happiness. He hung up before I could respond, leaving me standing in my kitchen as the rain intensified outside. Mrs. Nakamura waved from the sidewalk, her ancient terrier barking at the thunder. Normal life continuing while my world tilted off its axis. I walked to my bedroom closet and looked at the navy suit hanging there. $89 from JCPenney, bought on sale with a coupon Sophie had found online. She had been with me, helping me pick it out for her law school graduation. "This one, Daddy," she said, holding it up with that smile that could still light up my whole world. "It's perfect. You'll look so handsome." Now that same suit had become a test of wills between two men who claimed to love the same woman.
For 35 years, I'd hidden my true identity like a father hiding Christmas presents. But unlike those gifts that brought joy when revealed, this secret would cost my daughter everything she thought she wanted. 3 weeks before the wedding, Sophie appeared at my door unannounced at 10 p.m., mascara streaking down her cheeks like black rivers of pain. She stood on my porch in the rain, still wearing her work clothes, looking more like the scared little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms than the accomplished attorney she'd become. "Sweetheart, what happened?" I pulled her inside, wrapping her in the Afghan Caroline had crocheted during her chemo treatments, the one that still smelled faintly of the lavender she loved. "Preston's been acting so strange," she said, collapsing onto my worn couch, the same one where I'd read her Harry Potter, helped with calculus homework, and held her while she sobbed after her first heartbreak. "Every time I mention you coming to the wedding, he changes the subject or gets this look like he's swallowed something bitter. Did something happen between you two?" If you're a parent who's ever had to choose between protecting your child's happiness and telling them a truth that would destroy it, please subscribe now. Some pain is too heavy to carry alone. I handed her the box of tissues from the coffee table, buying time while I decided how much truth her heart could bear. The full story would destroy her relationship, but lies would destroy us. "We had a disagreement about wedding preparations," I said carefully, each word measured like evidence in a trial. "About what? The flowers? The music? The food?" She looked at me with those eyes, Caroline's eyes, that had always been able to see through my judicial poker face. "About expectations." She pulled her knees to her chest, looking smaller than she had since middle school. "Daddy, sometimes I feel like I'm drowning between two worlds. There's Preston's world, the country clubs and charity galas and people who vacation on private islands. And then there's our world, Sunday dinners and Netflix marathons and that little Italian place where Tony still remembers Mom's favorite order. Both worlds have value, Emma." "Do they? Because Preston makes me feel like I should be ashamed of where I came from. He introduces me as Sophie, Northwestern Law, never just Sophie, like I need credentials to deserve his last name." I moved closer, putting my arm around her shoulders. She still used the same shampoo she'd had since high school, vanilla and honeysuckle. Some things hadn't changed, even as everything else shifted like sand. "Do you love him?" I asked, though my heart already knew the answer I hoped to hear. I thought I did. He's everything I thought I wanted. Successful, ambitious, connected. He can open doors I never even knew existed. That's not what I asked. She was quiet for a long moment, watching rain streak down the windows. "When Mom died, you told me something. Do you remember?" I remembered everything about those dark days after Caroline's passing. Sophie was 15, angry at the world for taking her mother, angry at me for not being able to fix it, angry at God for not answering her prayers. "I told you that love isn't about what someone can give you. It's about who they are when everything else is stripped away." Preston without his money and connections and family name? I don't know who that person is. Maybe that makes me terrible, but I've never seen him vulnerable, never seen him fail at anything, never seen him be human. You're not terrible. You're honest. That takes more courage than most people ever find. She turned to look at me directly, studying my face like evidence. "Who are you, Daddy? I mean, really. You've never talked about your work beyond vague mentions of the courthouse. You never bring colleagues home. You never even told me your exact title. Preston thinks you're some kind of file clerk, and you've never corrected him." This was it, the moment I'd been avoiding for years, using privacy as a shield when perhaps transparency would have been armor. Would it change things if I told you? I don't know. Maybe. Preston respects power and position above everything else. If he knew you were someone important, then he'd treat you differently. But would that be real respect or just calculation? Sophie sighed, sounding older than her 29 years. "Everything with Preston is calculation. The wedding venue was chosen because 3 senators got married there. The guest list is organized by net worth and influence. Even our honeymoon in Santorini was selected because some Supreme Court justice vacations on the same island. Is that the life you want?" I used to think so. I thought if I could just fit into his world perfectly enough, I'd finally feel like I belonged somewhere important, like I was more than just the girl from Bridgeport whose mom died, who went to public school, who had to take out student loans. Sophie, you've never been just anything. You're brilliant, compassionate, and strong. You earned your place at Northwestern. You built your career on merit, not connections. Preston says merit only gets you so far without the right relationships. Preston says a lot of things. She laughed, but it was hollow, echoing in my modest living room. He wants to change our first dance song, says "At Last" by Etta James is too cliché. He wants some waltz his grandmother danced to at the Drake Hotel in 1953. Caroline and I had danced to "At Last" at our wedding. Sophie knew this. It was one of the threads connecting her to the mother she'd lost too soon. "What do you want?" I asked. "I want Mom at my wedding. I want my father to walk me down the aisle without feeling judged. I want to celebrate love, not perform for strangers." "Then why are you going through with it?" She looked at her ring again, the massive diamond catching lamplight like captured tears. "Because I already said yes. The deposits are paid. 400 people have plane tickets and hotel reservations. Preston's family would be mortified. The merger announcement." "Sophie, those are reasons. They're not good reasons." "I know," she whispered, fresh tears falling. "But I don't know how to stop it now. It's like being on a runaway train and the bridge is out ahead, but I can't reach the brake." I pulled her closer, feeling her shoulders shake with suppressed sobs. Outside, Chicago continued its restless energy. Sirens in the distance, the L rumbling past, ordinary sounds of a city that never stopped moving, even when individual hearts were breaking.
The morning of Sophie's wedding, I stood before my bathroom mirror in my $89 suit, the same one I'd worn to bury my wife, to watch my daughter graduate, to sentence men who thought money made them untouchable, and decided that some truths are worth more than fairy tale endings. Dawn broke over Chicago like spilled honey across Lake Michigan, golden and thick with possibility and dread. I'd been awake since 3 a.m., sitting in my study, surrounded by the weight of 35 years of judicial decisions. Framed on my wall, deliberately placed behind stacks of law books, hung my federal appointment certificate, signed by the President himself. Chief Judge, United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois. If you've ever stood at the crossroads between keeping a secret and revealing a truth that could change everything, please don't click away. Subscribe, because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is show up as exactly who you are. I showered with methodical precision, shaved with hands steady from decades of signing orders that changed lives. The navy suit hung on my closet door like a flag of defiance. I put it on piece by piece, shirt, pants, jacket, each item a small revolution against Preston Whitmore IV and everything his world represented. My phone buzzed. Sophie, Daddy, car picking you up at 3. Can't wait to see you. Love you so much. Today I become Mrs. Whitmore. No mention of suits or ultimatums or the sword Preston had hung over our heads. Either he hadn't told her about his threat, or she was pretending everything was perfect. Both possibilities shattered my heart in different ways. At 2:45, I stood in my living room, fully dressed, studying my reflection in Caroline's antique mirror, the one her grandmother had brought from Ireland, the one that had reflected 4 generations of love and loss. The suit looked exactly as it should, respectable, appropriate, dignified. It was the suit of an honest man, a good father, a keeper of justice. The car arrived precisely at 3, not a limousine, but something Preston probably considered adequate for transporting the help. The driver, a young man named Marcus, chatted pleasantly about the Cubs and the weather, unaware he was driving someone to their own execution.
The peninsula Chicago rose before us like a monument to everything Preston worshipped: wealth, status, the ability to look down on others from a great height. Valet attendants in uniforms worth more than my suit guided arriving Bentleys and Ferraris with choreographed precision. I emerged from my middle-class chariot feeling like a sparrow among peacocks, but a sparrow who knew secrets about how the sky really worked. Inside, the lobby sparkled with old money and new tech wealth, voices echoing off marble with the particular residence of people who'd never been told they didn't belong. I recognized faces from newspaper headlines, television interviews, federal cases that had shaped Illinois law. Judge Brennan? I turned to find Darius Coleman approaching with his hand extended. We'd met years ago when I'd presided over his wrongful termination case against the Chicago Police Department. I'd ruled in his favor, a decision that had changed his life and eventually led him to private security. Darius, I shook his hand warmly. Good to see you. Likewise, Your Honor. I didn't know you had family getting married today. My daughter, Sophie. His eyebrows rose slightly. She's marrying into the Whitmore family? So it seems. Darius leaned closer, his voice dropping. Between us, Your Honor, Preston Whitmore is difficult. We've had multiple incidents with him at events here. Verbal abuse of staff, excessive demands, that entitled attitude that makes you want to accidentally forget your professional training. I'm not surprised. If you need anything today, anything at all, you come to me directly. He handed me his card. My personal cell is on the back. And, Your Honor, my whole family owes you. You gave me my life back with that ruling. As Darius walked away, I felt the universe aligning pieces on a chessboard I hadn't known existed. I made my way toward the ballroom, passing clusters of guests who looked through me as if I were invisible, just another unremarkable attendee at an event above his station. The ballroom doors stood open like the mouth of a beautiful monster. Inside, $400,000 had been transformed into a fairy tale that would have made Caroline laugh at its excess. Orchids cascaded from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across tables dressed in silk and sterling. An ice sculpture of two swans formed a heart. Sophie's choice, I recognized, not Preston's. And there, near the altar constructed of white roses and baby's breath, stood my daughter. The dress transformed her into something ethereal. Caroline would have wept to see her. Sophie's face lit up when she spotted me, and she started toward me with that smile that had owned my heart since the moment she was born. Then Preston intercepted her. I watched him whisper in her ear, saw her expression shift from joy to confusion, to something approaching panic. She looked between us, her wedding day suddenly poisoned by whatever venom he was pouring into her ear. That's when Preston raised his hand, summoning security with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never heard the word no from anyone who mattered. "This man," he announced, loud enough for arriving guests to hear, "was specifically told not to attend if he couldn't dress appropriately. Yet here he stands, insulting my family's legacy."
As 200 of Chicago's elite watched Preston try to remove me from my daughter's wedding, I realized that some men are so blinded by their own reflection that they can't see the cliff edge approaching. And I was about to be the wind that pushed him over. The ballroom fell silent except for the string quartet playing Mozart, Preston's grandmother's choice, not Sophie's. Every face turned toward us, their expressions ranging from horrified fascination to barely concealed delight. This wasn't the kind of drama the Whitmore-Pullman merger announcement was supposed to generate. "Preston, what are you doing?" Sophie's voice cracked like spring ice on Lake Michigan, her bouquet trembling in her hands. "That's my father." "Darling, we discussed this." Preston's tone carried that particular condescension men like him perfected at prep school. "Standards must be maintained. Your father chose to ignore my very reasonable request about appropriate attire." Mrs. Whitmore, Preston's mother, glided forward in her custom Valentino gown, her face a mask of practiced concern hiding genuine panic. "Perhaps we could handle this quietly. The Tribune photographer is already here." "No, Mother, this needs to be addressed publicly." Preston's jaw set with the stubbornness of someone who'd been told he was special since birth. "If we allow this, what's next? Cash bars? Buffet lines? Department store registry gifts?" Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. I recognized several faces: Judge Marlene Fitzgerald from the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, Senator Richard Blackstone, Victoria Sterling, CEO of Sterling Tech, people who knew me professionally but had never connected Garrett Brennan, Sophie's father, with Chief Judge Brennan, who'd shaped Illinois law for 3 decades. If you've ever watched someone you love choose image over integrity, hit that subscribe button now. Sometimes we need witnesses when the universe delivers justice in real time. Darius arrived with 2 other security guards, his face professionally neutral. But when his eyes met mine, I saw the flicker of recognition, the slight nod that said he understood what was about to unfold. "Mr. Whitmore," Darius said formally, "you've asked us to remove a guest? This man," Preston gestured at me with disgust, "is wearing a suit from JCPenney, an $89 suit from JCPenney, at my wedding, with federal judges present, with the governor in attendance." "Several federal judges, actually," Judge Fitzgerald interjected, stepping forward. Her voice carried the authority of 25 years on the bench. "Hello, Garrett." Preston's head snapped toward her. "You know him?" "Know him?" Marlene's laugh was sharp as winter wind off the lake. "Garrett Brennan is—" I raised my hand slightly, and Marlene stopped, understanding my signal. This was my moment to handle, my truth to reveal.
Mr. Whitmore, Darius said, his voice gaining an edge of steel, I cannot and will not remove this gentleman from the premises. What do you mean you can't? I'm paying. Mr. Brennan is on our federal protection list, Priority 1 clearance. In fact, Darius pulled out his phone, making a show of checking something. Yes, here it is. Chief Judge Garrett Brennan, Northern District of Illinois. Appointed by the President, confirmed by the Senate. Security clearance level that, frankly, Mr. Whitmore, exceeds anyone at this wedding, including the governor.
The silence that followed was complete, profound, the kind that occurs when the world shifts on its axis. I watched Preston's face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and finally, horrified understanding. Chief Judge? His voice came out as a whisper. For 35 years, I said quietly, letting each word land with the weight of truth. I've presided over cases worth billions, constitutional challenges that redefined civil rights, corruption trials that sent governors to prison. I've shaped the legal landscape of Illinois, influenced federal law, been cited by the Supreme Court. But to you, Preston, I was just Sophie's embarrassing father in a cheap suit. Sophie stepped between us, tears streaming down her face, her mascara drawing dark rivers on her cheeks. Daddy, why didn't you tell him? Why didn't you tell me to tell him? Because I wanted him to know you for you, Sophie, to love you for who you are, not whose daughter you are. I wanted him to respect me as a person, not a title. And now we all know exactly what kind of man he is when he thinks no one important is watching. This is impossible, Preston stammered, his Princeton, Yale, Harvard-educated brain short-circuiting. You drive a Ford. You live in Bridgeport. You shop at JCPenney. Yes, I said simply. I do. Because those things don't define my worth any more than your Armani suits define yours. The difference is, I understand that. You never will. Senator Blackstone stepped forward, his face grave. Judge Brennan, I had no idea Sophie was your daughter. We need to have lunch soon. There's a federal appointment I'd like to discuss. Victoria Sterling joined him. Your ruling in the workplace discrimination case last year changed our entire corporate culture. For the better, I should add. It's an honor to finally meet you in person. More people pressed forward, all suddenly eager to acknowledge me, to claim connection to someone they'd ignored moments before. The same people who'd watched Preston try to humiliate me were now treating me like visiting royalty. Stop, I said, my voice carrying the authority of 3 decades on the bench. Everyone froze. This is my daughter's wedding day, or it was supposed to be. I turned to Sophie, whose face was a masterpiece of ruined makeup and shattered dreams. Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. This isn't what I wanted. $400,000, Preston muttered, his face pale as parchment. This wedding cost $400,000. No, I corrected him. This wedding cost my daughter her happiness. It cost her the chance to celebrate love instead of performing wealth. It cost her the simple joy of having her father walk her down the aisle without conditions or ultimatums. Mrs. Whitmore touched her son's arm. Preston, perhaps we should... Should what, Mother? He laughed, high and slightly hysterical. Apologize? Pretend I didn't just try to throw out a federal judge? Pretend the merger announcement won't be completely overshadowed by this catastrophe? The only catastrophe here, Judge Fitzgerald said coldly, is your character, young man. I've known Garrett Brennan for 20 years. He's one of the finest legal minds in the country and one of the best men I know. The fact that you couldn't see that because of a price tag says everything about you
and nothing about him. In the ruins of a $400,000 fairy tale, my daughter stood between two futures, one paved with gold and misery, the other unknown but honest, and I watched her become the woman her mother always knew she could be. Sophie stood in the center of the ballroom like a beautiful ghost, her wedding dress catching the light from 1,000 crystals above. The 400 guests had formed a loose circle around us, their expensive clothes and glittering jewelry unable to disguise their hunger for drama. This was better than any charity gala gossip, the real-time collapse of one of Chicago's most anticipated society weddings. "Sophie!" Preston reached for her hand, but she stepped back, the small movement sending ripples through her silk dress. "Darling, let's go somewhere private and discuss this." "Private?" Sophie's laugh could have shattered champagne flutes. "You just tried to throw my father out of our wedding in front of everyone. You announced his suit price like you were reading criminal charges. What exactly is left to keep private?" If you've ever had to choose between a comfortable lie and a painful truth, don't leave yet. Subscribe, because sometimes the hardest choices lead to the greatest freedoms. "I didn't know he was a judge," Preston said, as if that explained everything, excused everything, erased everything. "And that matters?" Sophie's voice rose, carrying across the ballroom with the clarity of someone trained to argue before juries. "If he actually was a file clerk, if he actually made $40,000 a year, if this really was just an $89 suit on a working man, would that make your cruelty acceptable? Would that justify your ultimatum?" Preston's parents moved closer, forming a protective wall around their son. Mr. Whitmore Sr., whose face graced Forbes magazine annually, cleared his throat with boardroom authority. "Perhaps we're all overreacting," he said in his merger and acquisition voice. "Emotions run high at weddings. These things happen." "These things?" She turned on him. 29 years of suppressed frustration finally finding voice. "You mean treating people like they're disposable? Measuring worth by net worth? Teaching your son that money excuses cruelty?" "Now see here, young lady," Mrs. Whitmore began, her voice sharp as her diamonds. "No." Sophie's single word silenced her future mother-in-law. "I've spent 6 months seeing how you treat anyone making minimum wage, seeing how you talk about people who shop at Target like they're a different species, seeing how you look at my father's car, his house, his clothes, like they're personal insults to your existence." She turned to the crowd, addressing them like the prosecutor she'd trained to be. "How many of you knew what Preston was planning? How many of you heard about the suit ultimatum and said nothing? How many of you were waiting to see if Sophie Brennan's father would show up in his JCPenney special?" Uncomfortable shuffling answered her. Eyes found the floor, the ceiling, anywhere but her face. The Chicago elite, caught in their complicity.
"Judge Fitzgerald," Sophie addressed the federal judge directly. "You've known my father for 20 years. In all that time, have you ever seen him treat someone as less than human because of what they wore or what they earned?" Marlene's answer was immediate and firm. "Never. Your father treats everyone, from janitors to senators, with equal respect and dignity. It's what makes him exceptional, both as a judge and as a man." "But I was willing to marry someone who doesn't," Sophie's voice broke. "I was so desperate to be someone important, to matter in the world Preston inhabits, that I was willing to let him diminish the man who raised me alone, who sacrificed everything for me, who taught me that character matters more than credentials." She walked to me, her heels clicking against marble like a countdown. When she reached me, she took my hands in hers, her fingers cold, trembling, but her grip firm. "Daddy, I'm so sorry. Not just for today, but for every dinner where Preston insulted you and I stayed quiet. For every time he made snide comments about your house, your car, your clothes, and I didn't defend you, for being so blinded by his world that I forgot what you taught me about what really matters. Sophie, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She turned back to Preston, whose face had gone from pale to flushed. You know what my father did after Mom died? He learned to French braid from YouTube so I wouldn't go to school with messy hair. He worked overtime to pay for my debate team trips. He wore the same shoes for 4 years so I could have a prom dress that made me feel like a princess. Sophie, please, Preston started forward. He sat through every terrible school play, every boring award ceremony, every failed piano recital, and told me I was wonderful. He taught me to drive in the Jewel Osco parking lot. He held me when I cried over boys who broke my heart. He never once, not once, made me feel like I wasn't enough exactly as I was. She pulled off her engagement ring, the massive diamond catching the light like a falling star. And you couldn't even look at him with disgust because his suit cost $89? You're making a mistake, Preston said, his voice shifting from pleading to threatening. You'll never have this opportunity again. The connections, the lifestyle, the doors that will open. Doors, Sophie laughed, but it was sad rather than bitter. You know what doors my father opened for me? The door to integrity, the door to compassion, the door to understanding that every person has inherent worth that has nothing to do with their bank account. She held out the ring to Preston. He didn't take it. If you walk away now, he said coldly, all pretense of love evaporating, you're walking away from everything. The Whitmore name, the Pullman connections, the merger that would have made you one of the most powerful women in Chicago. I'm walking away from becoming someone I don't recognize, someone who would let her father be humiliated for the crime of not meeting a dress code that was really just a test of worth, someone who would marry a man who sees kindness as weakness and compassion as a character flaw. She placed the ring on the gift table, among the silver-wrapped packages from Neiman Marcus and Tiffany. The wedding is off, she announced to the room. I apologize to those who traveled to be here, but I won't apologize for choosing my father over a future built on contempt for people like him. The silence that followed was deafening. 400 of Chicago's most powerful people stood frozen, witnessing something they rarely saw. Someone choosing love over money, integrity over influence, family over fortune.
In an empty ballroom meant for 400 guests, with champagne going flat and ice sculptures melting into memory, I finally gave my daughter the only wedding gift that mattered, the freedom to dance to her own music, even if the world wasn't watching. The exodus was swift and awkward, like watching a theater empty after a show that ended badly. The Whitmore and Pullman families left first, Preston flanked by his parents like a defeated general being escorted from the battlefield. He didn't look back, didn't say goodbye to Sophie, just walked out with the rigid posture of someone whose entire worldview had shattered like his grandmother's antique champagne flutes. The senators and CEOs followed, murmuring excuses about early flights and urgent meetings. Some stopped to shake my hand, to whisper that they'd always suspected something off about that boy, or to promise lunches that we all knew would never happen. Judge Fitzgerald hugged Sophie tightly before leaving, whispering something that made my daughter smile through her tears. Within 20 minutes, the ballroom that had held 400 guests contained only 5 people: Sophie, myself, Darius, the security chief, Marcus, the driver who'd brought me, and, surprisingly, the string quartet's lead violinist, a young Asian woman who'd stopped packing her instrument to watch the drama unfold. If you're still here,
watching this story unfold, hit that subscribe button right now, because sometimes the best endings are the ones nobody else stays to see. Sophie stood in the middle of the dance floor, still in her wedding dress, looking lost in the sea of abandoned tables and elaborate centerpieces. $400,000 of decorations surrounded us like expensive tombstones marking the death of a dream that should never have been dreamed. $400,000, she said softly, surveying the waste. $400,000 Preston's family spent on a wedding that lasted less than 30 minutes. They spent $400,000 on a show, I corrected gently. A wedding is something else entirely. Darius approached, his security earpiece removed, looking more like the man whose case I'd decided years ago than the professional who'd just witnessed Chicago society implode. "Judge Brennan, Miss Brennan," he said gently, "I've spoken with hotel management. They want you to know the room is yours until midnight if you'd like. The Whitmores paid in full, non-refundable. The food, the bar, the musicians, it's all still available." Sophie laughed, watery but genuine. "A party for two?" "5, the violinist said, stepping forward. "If you don't mind, I'm Lily Nakamura, Mrs. Nakamura's granddaughter from your neighborhood, Judge Brennan. She talks about you all the time, says you helped her with her citizenship papers years ago, no charge." I remembered now, Mrs. Nakamura's granddaughter, the music student at DePaul. "You play beautifully, Lily." "Thank you, and honestly, that was the most satisfying thing I've ever witnessed. Preston Whitmore treated us like furniture, wouldn't let us take water breaks, insisted we remain invisible, actually timed our bathroom breaks." "Sounds like Preston," Sophie muttered. Marcus stepped forward. "If we're taking account, I'd like to stay too. That was something special. Watching someone choose right over rich, that doesn't happen much anymore." Lily raised her violin. "The rest of my quartet left, but I can play solo. Any requests?" Sophie looked at me, fresh tears in her eyes, but smiling now. "At last, Etta James. I can do that."
As the opening notes filled the empty ballroom, I held out my hand to my daughter. "May I have this dance?" Sophie stepped into my arms, and we began to move across the floor that should have hosted her first dance as a married woman. Instead, it became something else, a celebration of choices made, truths revealed, and love that didn't require designer labels to prove its worth. "I learned something today," Sophie said, as we swayed to the music. "What's that, sweetheart?" "That $89 can buy something worth more than all of Preston's fortune." "A suit?" "Integrity." She looked up at me with Caroline's eyes. "You could have told him who you were at any time, could have avoided all of this, but you wanted to see who he really was when he thought you had no power. I wanted him to see you for who you are, not whose daughter you are. And instead, I saw him for who he really is." She paused. "Daddy, why did you really keep your position secret all these years? Not just from Preston, but from everyone." "Because I wanted you to grow up feeling normal, to have friends who liked you for you, not because their parents wanted connections. To choose your own path without feeling the weight of my position. To know that you were loved for exactly who you are, not what advantages you could provide. But I ended up choosing someone who only valued positions and connections anyway. You chose someone who promised you a world you thought you wanted. There's no shame in that. The shame would have been staying after seeing the price of admission." Darius had found champagne somewhere and was pouring glasses at the bar, watching us with the satisfied expression of someone who'd seen justice served. Marcus had loosened his tie and was sampling the untouched hors d'oeuvres, shaking his head at the waist. Lily transitioned from "At Last" to other slow songs, her violin filling the space with melancholy beauty. "What am I going to do now?" Sophie asked.
I quit my job to plan this wedding. The apartment is in Preston's name. I have 2 suitcases of clothes and a law degree I haven't used in 6 months. You're going to come home, I said simply. Your room is exactly as you left it. You're going to take some time to remember who Sophie Brennan is without the Whitmore suffix, and then you're going to rebuild. Not your life, but the life you actually want. I'm 29, Daddy. I'm supposed to have it all figured out by now. I'm 64, and I'm still figuring it out. The only difference is I've learned that having it all is less important than having what matters. We danced through 3 more songs before Lily lowered her violin. I should go. My grandmother is probably worried. Thank you, Sophie said, and I could see she meant it deeply. For staying, for playing, for witnessing. Thank you, Lily replied, for showing me that standing up for yourself is worth more than any paycheck. After Lily left, Sophie and I sat at one of the abandoned tables, eating the elaborate dinner meant for 400. We laughed at the pretentious menu descriptions like deconstructed Caesar salad with molecular parmesan. It was just lettuce with cheese foam. The wedding cake, a 7-tier monstrosity that cost more than most cars, tasted like sweetened cardboard. Mrs. Nakamura's apple pie is better, Sophie said, and we both laughed until we cried. As midnight approached, we stood to leave. Sophie looked around the ballroom one last time, at the wilting orchids, the melting ice sculptures, the remnants of a life she'd almost chosen.
No regrets? I asked. One, she said. I wish Mom could have seen me in this dress. Even if the wedding was a disaster, the dress was perfect. She would have loved it, and she would have been proud of you for walking away. We made our way through the hotel lobby, Sophie still in her wedding dress, me in my $89 suit. The night manager, who'd heard about the evening's events, stopped us. "Ms. Brennan," he said carefully, "Mr. Whitmore left something for you." He handed her an envelope. Inside was a check for $75,000 and a note. "To cover your contributions to the wedding, consider it severance. P." Sophie tore both the check and the note into confetti, letting the pieces fall like snow onto the marble floor. "Some things," she said, "can't be bought or sold." We walked out into the Chicago night, the city lights reflected in Lake Michigan like scattered diamonds. My Ford sat in the parking lot like an old friend, reliable and unpretentious. Sophie gathered her dress and climbed in, laughing as the fabric filled the entire back seat. "Home?" I asked. "Home," she confirmed. As we drove through the familiar streets toward Bridgeport, Sophie reached over and took my hand. "Daddy, thank you for wearing the suit." "It's a good suit," I said. "It's a perfect suit," she corrected. "Worth everything it cost us to reveal the truth."
Sophie reopened her law practice, this time specializing in employment discrimination and civil rights cases. She kept an office in Bridgeport, close to the communities that needed her most. The Northwestern degree on her wall sat next to a framed photo from that empty ballroom. Just her and me, dancing in formal wear, surrounded by abandoned luxury. Preston married someone more suitable 4 months after our non-wedding. The Tribune covered it extensively. The merger was announced, stock prices soared, and none of it mattered to Sophie anymore. She met someone new at a legal aid fundraiser, a public defender named Daniel who drove a 12-year-old Honda and whose favorite restaurant was the little Italian place that still remembered Caroline's order. He treats Sophie like she hung the moon and the stars, and more importantly, he treats everyone else with the same respect. When they got married the following spring,
It was in my backyard. Sophie wore a simple dress from Nordstrom, on sale with a coupon. I wore the same $89 navy suit from JCPenney. Mrs. Nakamura made the wedding cake. Lily played the violin. It cost less than what Preston spent on flowers alone, and it was perfect. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that worth isn't measured in dollars, but in character, please subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they are enough, exactly as they are. And remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply living your truth, even if that truth comes dressed in an $89 suit from JCPenney.